What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Crash Course Metal Show. We got with us here our buddy again. When you see Tim Durling coming around the show, we're going to be talking a very, very underground type band that did not get the right press or play throughout the 80s. And, but we'll get to that here. Tim, what is going on, my man? How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Crash. Thanks for having me on again. This is it's always fun to talk about these bands that honestly I forget that I have in my collection. And sometimes I'm like, when did I get this? When did I even get this? Because this is a band that I didn't discover till about 4 years after their first album came out. So,
Okay.
but I picked it up or a buddy of mine picked it up and liked it, and then I picked it up. You see, when the musical shift happened in the early 90s, there was a period from about, I'd say 93 through 96, where you could find so many of these bands CDs really, really, really cheap.
Yes, the bargain
You know,
bins.
the bargain is, and good bands too, like Baton Rouge, who we've talked about. And
Mhm.
the band we're talking about today is no exception. But of course, now, if you try to find the stuff, it's not quite as easy to find, and it's not quite as cheap.
Right. Yeah,
So
that's 100% true. That those days were gone about maybe 10 years ago now. I would say it's you certainly don't get no bargain stuff anymore. But Tim, since you've been gone, since we last seen you, you did release a new book. Do you mind telling us what that's all about?
absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, it's not exactly the purview of most of the bands that you talk about on here, but
Mhm.
a great band. I'm sure a band that's influenced, several groups. So we're kind of heading into the prog rock world with Kansas. Let It Be Your Guide, the Kansas album review. This just came out. It's available on Amazon. Gorgeous cover art by my good friend Matt Phillips at Go North Design. And this is another panel book like my Y&T book, where I sit a bunch of people down, ask them all the same questions about each of the studio albums to get some answers. It's a longer book than the Y&T because there's 3 more albums to talk about. I've got more panelists. Great black and white photos. The black and white photos came out really, really well, like they did in the Y&T book.
Nice.
Really
Okay.
happy with it. And and I was talking to Trevor too. He's like, I think I know a couple of Kansas songs, and I would say if you're into most of the bands that Crash talks about, and you're like, oh, Kansas, what about Kansas? And you think, well, I don't know about Carry On Wayward Son, Dust in the Wind, whatever. I would say go to their 1986 album Power, and give that a listen, because you don't necessarily have to be a prog rock fan to like that album. It's just a good 80s rock album. If you like shredding guitar, it's got Steve Morris on it. So
Okay.
it's really good stuff. But yeah, thank you for letting me give that a plug.
Of course, of course. Now, like for people that aren't aware of Tim, he also has the channel Tim's Vinyl Confessions as well. That I will put a link in the description as well in the video here. But yeah, you're one of my. Every time I see a new book come out from you, I'm like, damn, because I always think of you as the YouTuber, not an author. So whenever I see a new book, I'm like, damn, Tim's at it again. That's awesome. That's really cool to see though, because like obviously my generation, I would say, or younger, they don't know what books are. So it's
Yeah,
like
it's,
what but I really enjoy reading old like school documentary type book like what you do and stuff. Like just I think it's awesome. Keep doing it, man. And you might have to venture into one of these underground type bands. Do a compilation of a book, with Tattoo Rodeo or Baton Rouge, put them all together. That'd be pretty cool. uh
yeah. The way my mind works, I find it much easier to pick one band or artist and concentrate on. But you never know. Yeah, it's my third book. I never thought I'd be doing any of them. Never mind on my third one, and I've got
yeah.
a couple other ideas in mind. But yeah, it's been really, really cool. And I thank you for the Y&T Down for the Count. I see there in the
Yep.
background. That's very, very cool.
Yes, sir. And that's the thing. And I'm sure more of my subscribers do know who Y&T is, at least. I would hope so. Anyway, so yes, please go check out Tim's Y&T book as well. Very good stuff. Very good reviews as well on it. Let's jump into the band that we're here to talk about today, and that is going to be Tattoo Rodeo.
Shotgun Johnny, Stone Cold Johnny. Can't you see that it's you and me with the shotgun? Shotgun.
They do have two releases here. You know, the put Road Hard, Put Away Wet, and then they also have the 1995 Skin. Tim, kind of give us a little bit of background, if you will, on Tattoo Rodeo and like how you even came to know of Tattoo Rodeo.
Well, Tattoo Rodeo were one of, that huge glut of bands that Atlantic Records signed up in 89, 90, 91. I think that more than any other label, they kind of went crazy signing bands. I mean, for every Winger and Skid Row, bands that went on to platinum success, there were so many bands they signed for one album and they just did nothing. And it doesn't mean it wasn't good music. I think it just meant there were just too many groups. They were just all competing for the same space. So,
Right.
I mean, yeah, there were Tattoo Rodeo and Baton Rouge and Electric Boys, Electric Angels,
Yeah.
Hurricane Alice,
Yes.
Badlands, Banshee,
That's the
These Bees.
yeah.
There were so many.
Enough's Enough was on.
Enough's Enough was on Atco,
Yeah.
Atlantic. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Um,
Yeah. It's just that's one of the
Sons
points.
of Angels, and a lot of them had similar
Yeah,
names
that's
too,
right.
right?
Yep. That's one
What
of the
label?
points that I wanted
Yeah.
to bring up too, with you is that yeah, these bands, sure they didn't sell much, but you gotta think there's only so much time in a day to play a music video. There's only so much promotion money to go around, and just so many. Even though it was mainstream at the time, there's still only so many people to actually buy all this brand new, with the
Yeah.
ticket price being pretty high.
Well, I mean, it's all relative, right? I mean, your audience is young people, and that's what it would have been back then. Late teens, early 20s. You're working your first jobs. Maybe you just got an allowance. You're still in school. Maybe you can't buy 5 new albums every week. Maybe you buy 1 or 2.
Yep.
And yeah, really the labels. I mean, I'm a big, I lived through the grunge scene and that whole thing, and I was never on board with it. I was never a fan. But in a way, I kind of understand why something had to change, because there were just too many rock bands doing basically roughly the same thing. And the labels should be partly to blame for it, because they should have just said, stop signing bands. Stop, or maybe say to the bands, look, come back to us in 3-4 years, write some more songs, get some more things under your, and because a lot of times what you'd end up with were records that had maybe 1 or 2 really, really good songs on them. The rest was just kind of filler. Now, not always. I think that, we talked about this. I think both of the Baton Rouge albums on Atlantic are both really, really strong albums. It's just, again, there were too many of them. And if you don't land that big opening slot on a big tour, and Tattoo Rodeo, actually, they had a little bit of success. So to rewind a little bit, the lead singer, Dennis Churchill-Dries, and guitarist Rick Chadock, who sadly passed away in 2006, were in a band called White Sister. And they were more of, I've never heard them. I'm just going to guess they were more keyboardy, because they had an album out in 1984 on EMI, and it was produced by Greg Giuffria. And if it's produced by Greg Giuffria, I'm guessing there's a lot of keyboards on it.
Yeah, yep.
So, and then they did one more album in 87 for a UK label called FM, or FM Revolver, and they had kind of a following over there in the UK, but nothing much happened. So they regrouped, and they kind of went more in the rootsy Cinderella, Tesla type of feel. And
like you said, bluesy. Like whenever I think of like Tattoo Rodeo, even I'm like, if you can think of a rock band from Oklahoma, or Wyoming, or some Midwestern state or part of the country, I think they would fit perfect in that like demographic of people. What you think that would sound like.
And they actually ended up opening at least some shows for must have been like a third act, because in 1991 you had Bad Company with Brian Howe. That kind of second win with Dangerous Age, and then the Holy Water album, and they started selling records again, and they went out and they had Damn Yankees opening for them. And so Tattoo Rodeo kind of fits right in there a little bit. They've also got a little, they got a little Cinderella, a lot of Cinderella with the acoustic slidey intros. Almost every
Oh
song
yeah. Yeah.
has one of those. But
Yep.
but yeah, with the damn Yankees, early '90s Bad Company sound, they kind of fit right in. As a matter of fact, I've noticed, I'm one for reading the credits, right?
Mm-hmm.
They, they thank a lot of people there, but they thank Jack Blades in here, so that might have something to do with that tour. So,
Okay.
and yeah, so they were signed to Atlantic and put out this first album, Rode Hard, Put Away Wet. And I have to say though, it is significant that both my cassette and my CD copy, if you look, they're both delete copies. They're both cutouts.
Oh yeah. Same with mine.
Yours. So I bet you it's harder to find a copy of this album that doesn't have that than it is to find one because they just made too many, right? And they because I remember seeing a whole dump bin full of Baton Rouge Shake Your Soul albums with a cut through it. Not only did they have the cut through it, but they were still all in their long boxes.
Oh my God.
That, I wish I'd have bought 4 or 5 of them so I
Yeah.
could give buddies like, this is a good album. This is a good
Yeah.
album. But yeah, so Tattoo Rodeo, I think I remember seeing an ad for it in Circus or Hit Parader when this came out. But like I said, there was just so many bands out at the time, I just couldn't keep track. So it was about 4 years later, a friend of mine bought this cassette. It was like $1. He's like, what have I got to lose?
Yeah.
We listened to it on the way home. I was like, this is pretty good.
Yeah.
And the next time we went, I happened to find the CD. So I bought the CD and kind of listened to it, filed it, didn't think much more of it until I got a hold of the second album, but we'll get to that in its time. This album actually had a little bit of success with the song Been Your Fool.
Mm-hmm.
That song got all the way to number 12 on the Billboard mainstream rock chart.
Did it get that high? Okay.
Not a lot of the bands from this era could boast that, having a mainstream rock hit that late or that far into the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and it's a it's a good bluesy ballad. Like I said, it's in very much, if you like Heartbreak Station era, Cinderella, Psychotic Supper era, Tesla, you probably like this album. And I gotta say, one of the big assets this band had that maybe separated them a little bit, Dennis Churchill-Dries is a fantastic singer.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
A really strong, powerful, bluesy voice. It's just perfect for this type of music.
It is. And he has a couple different vocal deliveries as well. And you even hear that on the second album. I think probably maybe even a little bit more. But
Yeah.
I agree 100%. And that kind of going back a little bit to your point, your AOR point, whenever I look up like bios of Tattoo Rodeo or whatever, I always hear that people comparing them to AOR type stuff. And I never understood really why, because I don't really consider the debut here AOR, when you think of AOR. But since you said about their previous band with some of the members, that makes total sense as to why.
But there are some keyboards on this, this piano, but there are some songs that have synth on it.
Yeah.
Just not a lot.
Yeah, it's certainly not overpowering, I would say, in any one song that I can remember.
No, I mean, it's not like a Europe album or something, you know what I mean?
Right.
So it's it is interesting, but I think people are going back to that
now
earlier. But I can't, when I hear him sing, I can't imagine him singing in a really keyboardy band.
I know, me neither. Like AOR is like the last thing I think about when I think of Tattoo Rodeo. I don't know. That's just something that I never saw the comparison for whenever I read those like bios or reviews or whatever. But Ben Your Fool, though, back to Ben Your Fool, the single, was that the first single off of this?
I am going to say that it might have been not the only single. I'm really not sure, but it might have been the only video. It might have been, might have been the only video that, Atlantic gave them money to do a video.
Right, because I can't ever remember seeing another video at all, even for the second album.
And I don't remember seeing any of their videos in its time.
Ben Your Fool is a really good song. And whenever I listen to that song, I always think of the Rolling Stones song,
Oh, Fool to Cry.
Yeah, A Fool to
Yeah,
Cry.
yeah, yeah. Okay, I hear that. Yeah, and
Yeah.
also, the production on this album is
Mhm.
really good. It's not dated. Some of these early '90s productions are
I
dated.
agree.
I
Yeah.
think this one is really good. It's produced by a guy named Ron Bloom, and I'm not familiar with
Mhm.
that name. Maybe somebody out there is, but and there's another name that kind of a guy that's on the sidelines, and I've seen his name different places that figures into the background vocals, and the engineering is a guy named Paul Sabu. Anyway, he features on this album, and but yeah, I think that they the album sounds really good. They were managed by Camel, which is Bruce Bird, who he managed Night Ranger, and he managed well, I want to say he managed Vince Neil at the beginning of his solo career, but I think he died sometime in the '90s too. So I mean,
Okay.
they had some big, people behind them, and I mean, Atlantic's a huge label, but like I said, just too much competition for that same space, that same airtime, video time.
Yes. And just too close to the end as well. And now we're looking here at this album, the debut, and it is 13 tracks. Generally speaking, there's not many really good 13-track albums. But I have to say though, this one here, like you said, production's good. I think so too. It don't sound dated. Still sounds really, really good. But I mean, there might be one or two songs to where I don't think are memorable and I don't like have on the iPod that I just are like, they're just okay or whatever. But like everything else, man, like I get into everything else. Everything else is catchy. And like you did mention earlier, the other ballad, Let Me Be the One. I think that could have easily been another hit if it would have got proper play.
Let it wash away his sins. Let me be the one who makes you care. Oh, let me be the one who's always there for you.
Yeah, and I think Tell Me Why could have too.
Yeah,
I think that's a really good power ballad.
I do
Good.
too. Yep.
It's a good, like Baton Rouge had great power ballads, like There Was a Time and
Mm-hmm.
It's About Time. I mean,
Yeah, yep.
they, yeah, it's that good. I think Shotgun Johnny's a really good song.
It is.
It's a good one.
I like the what gang chorus vocal or what I guess it's not
Yeah.
gang vocal, but it's like a chant where they go bang, like
Yeah.
really catchy.
I mean, it's definitely of its time, but I think production wise, like when you hear the drums come in, the snare drum sounds really good, and the bass is nice and loud.
Mhm.
Some of the stuff that you can't hear the bass. The bass is nice and loud on here, and yeah, it's good. I mean, it is of the CD age for sure.
Mhm.
They
Right.
might have whittled it down to a 10-song album and saved a few of these, but it's good. It doesn't, none of the songs go on for that long. I don't think there's anything over 5 minutes on here, so that makes it a good thing. But like I said, I don't ever remember seeing this album in the regular racks in the stores. I only ever remember seeing them in the cutouts. So it's just one of those things that they had a shot, but who knows how close a lot of these bands came to making it, right? But
Right.
yeah, there's something to be said for the fact you and I have the exact same. I mean, we both have cutout versions of the CD. The cassette's a cutout. I mean, yeah, it's a shame, but there is something that came out of it, Crash, and I think it's the fact that a lot of these bands that got dropped from their major label, if they stuck it out and stayed together, they ended up doing some pretty good music. They ended up
I
making
agree.
some pretty good music on a smaller label. And I'm going to say that's what happened with Tattoo Rodeo.
Yeah, and we can get to it, but I totally agree here. Like a lot of bands that stuck to their guns didn't really change. Now, yes, they did mature, which the same thing with Tattoo Radio. You could tell they matured, but as long as they stayed within the confines of what their roots were, I think some of the best material from those bands are from the '90s, later '90s or mid '90s, and
Yeah.
so yeah, we'll get to the second album here.
Yeah. So
Skin.
sometime in '95 or this 9-song album came out called Skin.
In 2 days gone, with a mercy, 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 hold on. 2 days gone.
copy is a Canadian copy. It's on Mausoleum records, which is usually like, really heavy bands.
Right.
But in this case, it's not. And this copy is actually distributed by EMI in Canada, which is probably how I ended up finding it. And I'm just going to say, even though it's only got 9 songs on it, percentage-wise, I think this is the stronger album. I think that the first album was okay, but I think that there's something to be said for that adversity, and they really knuckled down and came up with an entertaining collection of songs. A little heavier, maybe.
Yeah.
It's even more rootsy than the first album, and
More mature.
There's a little more mature lyrically, but it's a good sounding album. It's produced by Sir Arthur Payson. This is a good sounding album too. It's really good sounding.
I think so too. Yeah, it doesn't sound like something that's just thrown together either. Like how some like mid-90s stuff, like from bands that obviously don't have the money anymore to produce a really good sounding album. But this doesn't sound like 1995 to me. It doesn't sound grungy. Now, the closest thing that I would probably could give an example to somebody is like when we say like mature or sounds different or more rootsy, I would say, or heavier, like maybe like what Warrant did with Ultraphobic.
You read my mind. I was thinking the same thing.
But without the grunge, though. Without the grunge.
Yeah, and it's the same year. Somewhere between like Ultraphobic and Dog Eat Dog.
Yes. Yep. 100%.
But really good. I mean, again, super vocals from Dennis Churchill-Dries. The first song, 2 Days Gone. Actually, it's interesting. When I first heard, I'm talking about Rat again, when Brat put their self-titled album out in 99, the one that they did for Portrait Sony, the first song on that album called Over the Edge.
Yeah.
Sounds exactly like 2 Days Gone.
It does a little bit now that you said that.
Riff. It's the exact same riff. It's the same pace. Just saying. But
I think I would still take 2 Days Gone though over the Edge though.
Yeah, I love Rat, but that was not a great album. But
okay, yeah. I'm average with it. I don't hate it, but I don't love it.
I don't think Rat ever did a bad album, but that's probably on the bottom just because one of them has to be.
Yeah, that's understandable.
I think the best 2 songs on here are the first 2 songs, 2 Days Gone and Feels Like Love. Feels Like Love feels like a really heavy Bad Company song to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I will say here, what are your thoughts on Chamber of Mary's Gun and also the ballad Waiting for You?
Those are surprising to me. They're very mellow, but they're not, I wouldn't call them poppy.
Right, yeah. Okay.
Very, very rootsy. Almost like I'm just trying to think of something that's comparable. And it's not coming to me right now. But
I would say I would say like Chamber of Mary's Gun is really kind of like, it brings a lot of soul, I feel like, with the piano, how the piano is, and just his voice, just the delivery of it.
It sounds 70s to me. Like,
okay. I never thought of it like that, but yeah, that now that you say that I could
maybe like Bad Company, because when Bad Company would do slow songs, they would be mellow. They'd sometimes have piano in them, and but yeah, there's certainly nothing in this that dates this album. You would never listen to this album and think this came out in 1995, other than the fact that it's very well produced, it's very clear, the instrument separation is really good. But yeah, there are a couple like breathing spots in the album, but right after that they get into Can't Keep My Woman Down, which has got this almost Led Zeppelin type of twisty to it. I really dig that one.
I would say that Can't Keep My Woman Down is the only song, other than maybe Waiting for You. Those are probably the 2 songs that could fit on the first album.
And I think Shotgun Johnny is about the only song on the first album that would fit in on this album.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I can totally see that. And then maybe even tell me why. I could possibly see that being on the second album though too. But just not nearly as not well produced, but like as glossy maybe is the right word.
Maybe take the synths off of it and do it just guitars.
Right.
And in case somebody's wondering, if you're on Discogs looking at the song titles, No, the last song, Blackened, is not a Metallica cover. It's really heavy though. It's a really heavy bluesy song, and the
Mhm.
lyrics are dark. But yeah, it's just an entertaining collection. Of course, there was very little chance it was going to ever click.
Right.
But I really like the fact they stuck it out, and they didn't just go away after the one album.
Yeah.
And I find this one, if I'm going to listen to Tattoo Rodeo, this is the one that I'm more likely to throw on, which, and I think it's because there's a scrappiness to it, and there's a fighting, they're fighting to get their music heard. And not that they
Somewhat of an edge to it a little
Yeah,
bit.
and it's not like the first album it's not like the first album's really polished and really commercial, but there's a sense of urgency on here, and there's a sense that you get the feeling they're doing exactly what they wanted to do.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
Too many songs on here. It's a good length. It's longer than an EP. It's a full album, for sure. But yeah, it's really worth seeking out. If you've only ever heard the first album, which would have been the more common one,
Mhm.
definitely seek this out, because it's good. And it's one of the reasons this band's still in my collection, because I like the fact that they put this out, and it's just a solid album. I mean, we talked about Baton Rouge. They had the two albums on Atlantic, and then in '97, basically Kelly Keeling and Jack Ponte put out that self-titled one, and that's the what you're talking about when bands run out of money and they get a drum machine and they just
Yeah.
throw some songs together. Not that there aren't some decent ideas on there, but it's not really a band. This sounds to me like a live band playing.
Yes.
And,
Yeah. I would take this album
very
100
little
times over
very
that.
little overdubbing, and
Yeah.
and it's just really solid and good, and there's nothing remotely, really, I wouldn't say there's anything remotely hair metal about this band, other than the time period that their first album came out in. But by the time they get to this one, no, they're just a good hard rock band
Yeah.
at the wrong time. You know what I mean? At the wrong
Exactly.
time.
Yeah. The only thing I really want to say yet about this album here is Waiting for You. I want to touch on that one more time because like I had this album because I had the debut first for years, and like about 4, I guess maybe 5 years now ago, I had it, I bought it sealed actually. I found a sealed copy, and I put it in. The first song that stuck in my brain was Waiting for You. And like I don't know, it was around Christmas time. Just like this is like a cold winter album to me. Like whenever I think of like December or Christmas time, I'm like, oh man, I'm gonna have to listen to the Skin again. Like
Yeah.
Waiting for You is so well done. I that's like one of my favorite ballads. I'm a ballad guy, and talk about an emotional song writing
It's
and
pretty
delivery.
heartfelt. It's pretty heartfelt in the lyrics. They're
Hmm.
not your average lyrics, really. The song, the title might sound like it is, but um, it's not really that cliched. But yeah, the lyrics are pretty good, and obviously the vocal delivery really sells it, right?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And you want to talk about getting emotional? Like, I know I might get my metal card taken from me here, but like on the right day or the right time or frame of mind, like that can bring a tear to your eye, that song. And that's one of my favorite Tattoo
Well,
Radio songs just in general and even
let's put it
ballads.
this way: if you just got dumped, I wouldn't put this song on. Okay, let's
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. Okay. I
yeah.
like that. And but
Unless
yeah,
you want to, unless you want to torture yourself.
yeah. Which some people do like to just wallow and dwell in that
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. It's like, do I want to feel better? No, play it again.
But yeah, no, and that's why you brought up Jack Ponte because I actually did a video recently and I brought up Jack Ponte and I was like, you know what? Every time Tim Durling comes on, Jack Ponte comes up in our conversation somewhere. So we got an active streak going of like 3 or 4 straight videos down, me and you bringing up Jack Ponte.
Usually,
So
well, if we ever talk about Baton Rouge, we inevitably end up
yes,
talking about Jack Pont. That's not the only place his name comes up. I mean,
Battle on AD actually.
and I also want to say he co-wrote something on the first Bon Jovi album.
Yeah, and I also seen Keel recently. He was involved with Keel.
He wrote Somebody's Waiting.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Yeah, he seems to be everywhere throughout the
He's
eight.
like, he's like a a littler known like Desmond Child or Jim
Right,
Val,
yeah,
songwriting guy, right?
yeah, yeah. I I have to say though, Tim, I'm with you. Skin is probably my favorite. I know that's crazy to say, but I think if anyone gives it a proper chance, I think they would come to pretty much the same conclusion. Now, yes, if so, I'm not going to give anyone shit for liking the first album or whatever, but
No, and it's such a small catalog. If you like this album, you might as well get the first album because it's not
right,
bad. It's certainly not
right,
bad.
yeah, I'm with you. But I generally lean towards Skin.
But
If I
song for
listen to
song,
one, you have to listen to the other though too. So
yeah, yeah.
I'm with you.
Dennis Churchill-Dries is such a great singer. You just why not listen to more?
Yes, I know. Right, I'm with you. Now, is there two? Is there three songs out of the whole catalog, both the albums combined, that you would recommend to somebody? Like, if they never heard them before, what three songs would you?
If you really like the early '90s power ballads, I'd go to Tell Me Why. I think that's a
Mhm.
great classic form of it. Um, and I think that 2 Days Gone is just a great grinding blues rocker. And if you like '70s style hard rock, I'd say Can't Keep My Woman Down.
Okay, that is a
Yeah,
catchy
I'd
song.
recommend those three. That gives you a pretty good spectrum of what they do.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. There's a great choices as well. You can throw a dart at the whole catalog here, and I don't think you're gonna come up with something that you're gonna be like, oh, I gotta turn that off.
So there's not any that you'd say, well, I don't actively like that song. Some of them some of them just stick to you more, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I'm with you. But yeah, Tim, do we have anything else? Like you said, it is a pretty short catalog here for Tattoo Rodeo, but I think they're certainly worth checking out.
How many times have you read a story where an A&R guy signs a band to a label, and by the time their first album got, the A&R guy is fired, so the only guy that cared about them is gone. So
Yeah.
the album gets published and it sits there, and that's when they get holes punched in them.
Yeah, and
So
that kind of reminds me of a story, maybe not exactly like that, but of Shadow King. If you're familiar with Shadow King.
that's another album that I used to see in the delete bins all the time. I mean, we're talking about Lou Gramm here,
Yeah,
but
that's an amazing album.
you know what the story is there.
Yes.
Atlantic Records was never going to promote anything with Lou Gramm that
Other
wasn't
than
for him.
yes,
They
yep.
wanted to get back with Mick Jones and do another Foreigner album. So they, as the industry term would say, they buried it, just like Columbia did when Joe Perry Project, let the music do the talking, which is a great album.
It is.
But everybody wanted him back in Aerosmith, so they didn't promote it.
That's crazy to me because
It's the
like
same reason I think why the first Blue Murder album wasn't successful, because they were on the same label as Whitesnake. I think John Sykes would have done way better if he'd assigned to a different label than his former
yeah.
bandmates.
Yeah,
I
because we
think
did mention that. I think we talked about that slightly on the Blue Murder episode that we did.
on
And
one hand, it's like, yes, Geffen Records, one of the biggest rock labels in the world at the time, but at the same time, John Kolodner said, I wanted to get John Sykes back writing with David Coverdale. And obviously that never happened. So,
right.
but I don't know. I've never understood why record labels wouldn't just, let's see what happens if we promote it.
Yeah,
It could end up bigger than the band we want them back with.
exactly. That and also you would think money is their bottom line. So like
And
why
they've
not
sunk money into it. So why, it's weird. It's like they know they're going to cost themselves some money putting it out, but they're not going to promote it anyway.
yeah, so I don't know if you have any words that you want just real quick want to say about the Shadow Kings since we kind of brought that up. Anything?
The funny thing is, I mean, I'm a big Foreigner fan. I love Lou Gramm. I don't have that album, so that's one on, I got to listen to it.
You might actually be able to find it like somewhat cheap yet because I've seen it a couple times physically and like just sometimes when I pass by like on eBay or whatever, like it's not outrageous. I'll say that. And
That was Vivian Campbell too, wasn't it?
yes, it
Yeah,
was a little bit of a mini super group as well.
yeah.
Like the other guys in it too. I'm really shocked that to hear the story behind that. Like when I heard or read about it or whatever, like I couldn't believe that because every single, or I don't know if there was that many singles, but I like that whole album. I think that whole album's really, really good and has legs. But Obviously,
Yeah.
the wrong time too. If you,
Yeah, and record labels are funny too because I mean, at that same year, Horner put that album Unusual Heat out with Johnny Edwards on vocals, who was in King Cobra,
Mhm.
and he's a great singer, but it didn't do anything. That ended up in the delete bins
Yeah.
too. So, you know, you'd think they would have said, "Well, okay, that didn't work. Let's see what happens with this."
Mhm.
But
Yeah. Well, Tim, I think we said most of our piece about Tattoo Rodeo, and then also, I guess, you know, Vivian Campbell and Lou
well,
Grant,
some
Chadock.
related things, you know, because inevitably it we're talking about that time period, and the same thing happened to a lot of groups.
Yeah, sad to say, but I mean, I guess when you look back at it, look back on it in retrospective, you're like, oh man, all this great stuff at one time. How did it die, or like what happened? Why did it fail? But I guess when you're living through it, uh, it's a little different. You see it a little differently.
Or you don't see it. Like I said, I
Well,
don't
yeah,
ever
right.
remember seeing this album, or, you know, not just seeing the album, but getting the chance to hear anything off of it.
Yeah,
And if you
yeah,
don't hear anything off of it, you're not likely to have a blind buy. Because what if it
exactly. Yeah,
sucks? You know?
yeah, yeah. I'm with you. And there wasn't YouTube back then, so that hurts.
Exactly. And if you didn't happen to catch the video the one time it played,
Yeah, at
you
three
know,
o'clock in the morning, and
exactly.
yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
All right, Tim, my man. Thank you so much for coming on about Tattoo Rodeo. Where else are we going to talk about Tattoo Rodeo?
That's right.
Here, on Crash Course Metal Show. But Tim, please, I will put I'll put where everyone can find you in their links in your links down below. But you had the final word, my man. Where can everyone find you at?
Thanks. Well, I'm at Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I put 2 videos out every week, and got free books. Those are all available for Amazon. Just look for my name, Tim Durling. And yeah, Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I post regularly on Instagram and Facebook, and you'll also find me guesting on the Contrarians, Grab a Stack of Rock, Ranch Rock Warehouse. You know, any show that'll have me.
Yeah, good deal. And I think we talk more, I guess, the most underground. I keep wanting to say underground, but stuff that got really overlooked,
Right.
the really forgotten stuff. And I think that I have a soft spot in my heart for all those bands and music that just got overlooked to begin with, and
Yeah.
that's why we love bringing you on, because you do know all those little spec details that are in the inserts and like all the behind the scenes
I
stuff.
try.
All right,
Yeah.
brother. Thank you, Tim, so much for coming on the show, man. Talking Tattoo Rodeo with us. But guys, let us know in the comments what you think of Tattoo Rodeo, and do you think they got the raw end of the stick as far as being in the early '90s and on Atlantic Records? That's Tim Durling from Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Trevor Crash Knight. Stay out of that collateral damage, and until next time, we will see you guys later.
Yeah, I wrote that. It's called I Want to Rock Your Body. And then in parentheses it says to the break of dawn.